the thing that's most that I think is the most interesting trend, what we're watching the most carefully, is the real differentiation between the performance of very large professional sites like the Facebooks of the world and the effort that they're putting into making their sites load quickly and be a really almost app-like experience as you're on them, versus traditional websites which feel slower and more sluggish. When we started CloudFlare, the first thing that we did to try to solve that problem for smaller websites was basically take tools like a CDN, and we built our own CDN network with POPs scattered all around the world that just automatically caches sites. But that really isn't sufficient to make sites more performant. And so what I think is the most exciting that there are a lot of companies that are working on, and we're one of them, is actually going in and making sure that the sites which are on that are on CloudFlare or on some of these other services that are coming down the line, they are optimized for whatever device is particularly accessing that site. So if you're surfing from an iPhone, you should get different content than if you're surfing from a desktop PC. Your JavaScript should be automatically optimized, and we should be able to clean that stuff up. If you've got the tools and skills to be able to do that yourself, then that is the sort of way that I think focusing on web performance is going to start differentiating a lot of sites that will feel sluggish to those sites that are going to be kind of the next wave. And so I think there's a lot of exciting stuff which is going on in that, and that's what we spend a lot of our time looking at.
Great. I was chomping at the bit in the last forum. I was sitting back there watching, thinking, God, I'd like to answer that question. I'd like to answer. The thing that really strikes me, and I'm new to this, so now I half know what I'm talking about. I know nothing about forums other than I participate in Camaro 5. Again, I'm old. But what interests me is the people in the long form content space, like blogs, they have a little different thing going on, right? They are the center of their publication, so that gives them a little more of a handle to use the resources of, say, Twitter. I tend to discount Facebook, and I can talk to you offline about that, but definitely Twitter to drive content. Some of the more engaged sites in our network, and I have data on 17,000 sites, the largest being some really large ones, what drives content, or what drives page views, is Twitter is amazing. It is as high as Google in some of these sites. So to say I don't need to do that is like, you got to figure out how to do that, And as I was sitting here listening to this stuff, I was thinking of all the people I heard talk, and I don't know any of you. Ask Andy is the most interesting one to me because of the name of it. His name is in the thing, right? So there's a personality attached to it. It's absolutely ripe for Twitter, and it can just be a curation, component of what he does that brings people into the site. There's a new thing on bow ties. You got to see it. It would drive unbelievable traffic, and I just know that from the experience with all these other sites. When it's not a personality, it's going to be harder for you guys. But I encourage you to figure it out. Raise your super people in your forums to kind of Twitter ability, so people will be pulled in by them. Hugely powerful. Hugely powerful.
The question was macro trends?
Yeah, and
macro
what you're
trends.
seeing.
What was Famous's answer? Can't get much more macro than this. The amount of information that's interesting and relevant to you is growing exponentially, right? But your time is still flat. So I think it's very critical that personalization, which means treating me as me, which is very different than anybody else in this room, is going to be critical.
Yeah. Check.
So some of the things that I'm seeing is the integration of CMS systems within forums, integration with like WordPress bridges are pretty interesting that I wouldn't have seen coming like 10 years ago. Facebook integrations with the Facebook login, it's just basically becoming a melting pot of different social media technologies, and where I've seen forums kind of be regarded as antiquated and separate from other social media movements. it seems as though Bodine and Huddler and the other platforms are starting to integrate those features and make it more of a integral part of the forum experience. And I think that's very interesting to me. It's all about the content, and to be able to put the content in the front spotlight makes it appealing.
What do you think, Dan? I'm thrilled that you asked. I have some perspective on this now. The thing that's been getting me really up in the morning and putting as much time behind all these communities as we have been is I see the big macro trend right now being search quality, being that we're in Google and there's this fire hose of lowest common denominator content being created at unbelievable rates at very cost efficient means, and they're winning in terms of search engine optimization. But I think the real difference is I believe in long-term search engine optimization and thinking in the long haul, Google being anybody who's trying to let people find content that they're looking for are best served by finding the best quality content available, not the people who play the game the best. And so I think that forums really do have the best quality content available. And Brian from Google mentioned earlier that forum content is written in the parlance that users write search queries. And so it really helps that fact that a thread title is often going to be written in the same type of language that a search query is going to be written in. And I think that the macro trend around search is a flight towards quality, and I think that forums have the most engaged, passionate, knowledgeable members that are writing great content. And I think that that macro trend is really working in all of our favors as far as just continuing to stoke that fire of passion that our users have and provide the technology to package that content in a way that we can make it more broadly available for search engines and for users. So I'm thrilled that you guys asked me my perspective. So we do have, like I said, some very, very brilliant technical minds up here with different perspectives. And so I think given that we've really tread a lot of the core forum questions in previous panels, I'd love to get as many questions from the audience as we can with the time we have allotted, and then get everybody to get a couple of drinks or a bite to eat. Sir.
Howdy.
How are you?
You know, I've heard Facebook and Twitter maybe 1,000 times today.
Yeah.
Obviously, those are very popular systems at this point, but I question whether or not some of these forums are becoming a little too dependent on going in that direction. And I question their longevity. I go back to CompuServe, I go back to AOL, I go back to Prodigy, MySpace, and they're all just short of dead now. Just a few years ago, MySpace was the second coming. Today, Facebook is the second coming. Tomorrow, it'll be something else. So I'm wondering to myself, what are we doing, what are we thinking about in regards to the future past Facebook, past Twitter, beyond those particular mechanisms, which are third-party mechanisms that could go to the wayside tomorrow? Are we being innovative in and of our own selves, and in what direction are we looking at doing so?
I think the gentleman in I don't know who it was in the last panel that said, you know, don't change it too much, right? Forum's a proven mechanism for sure, right? It's what you bolt on around it and how you use it that I think is important. You know, I use Facebook to know who my cousin's dating. I don't use it for anything else, right? I follow people I know on Facebook. I follow people who are interesting on Twitter. You guys fall in the world of people who are interesting, right? When somebody posts, you know, how to install that little thing on my transmission in my Camaro, which I did last weekend, there's actually some dude that crawled under there and took a picture of the transmission of the Camaro, right? I'm not going to get that anywhere else. But I want to know when a new subject pops up into that thing, and I'm doing that by looking at my phone 5 times an hour. And I'm not doing it because I have a Camaro. I'm doing it because I'm following a lot of interesting people, and one of those aspects is people in that community. So I think to not be plugged into that community does yourself a disservice. I don't know how it works with Facebook.
I think centralization is going to be less and less relevant. I think you can have 2 Facebooks, or 10 Facebooks, or 10,000 Facebooks, or 1 billion Facebooks.
Oh my God.
Well, they'll come and go, but it also, you can have them all. And the difference is going to be, at some point, you will have filters that pull the content that you're specifically looking for at that time. And so maybe I have my own blog that I took a picture of the underside of a Camaro, and someone else has a very good description of what it took to take that thing apart, and you're going to get that information in your feed because those are what's relevant to you.
I think one thing that's interesting is that at the end of the day, it's all about creating a community and a place for people to get together and speak and communicate with one another, share information. And so I think it's interesting to track what it is that causes these communities to fail. So if you look at like MySpace, why did MySpace fail? Well, it failed in part because it provided a user experience that got trashier and trashier over time. It became filled with spammers over time. It was something that it just stopped being cool over time because it lost kind of what its core mission was. Facebook is being beset right now with spammers. It'll be interesting to see whether they win or they don't. I think as you're thinking about your forums, the piece that you're at the end of the day trying to do is just create a healthy community where everyone who wants to communicate can, and it's not being beset by some sort of outside force. Do that, and you'll live forever.
I think that's a great point, is just be adaptable to where your traffic is coming from. And if it comes from Google or Yahoo for 10 years, and then Google for 10 years, and then Facebook for 10 years, there's never going to be a lack of people until we're all in the matching spacesuits with the silver boots. Everybody's going to want to know how to tie a bow tie, right? And if Ask Andy has that information and is surfacing it intelligently, that's going to be where people seek out that information. And I do think there is sustaining value in forums. So just does it need to be adaptive of where that traffic can come from and where you can distribute your content to. And that's what we really have to be mindful of, is that even if things come and go, we've got to stay on our toes and be adaptable.